The government toughens its stance on subdivided flats in industrial buildings. Beijing and Taipei slam South China Sea arbitration ruling.
Together, we have begun a political revolution to transform America, and that revolution continues.
And Bernie Sanders endorses Hillary Clinton for president.
Good evening. The government wants to step up the crackdown on subdivided flats in industrial buildings. It wants to make it a criminal offense for those found responsible. Winna Wong has our top story.
Last month, a number 4 alarm fire ripped through an Artero industrial building. It killed 2 firefighters and raged for days before it was put out. A few weeks later, 2 teenage siblings were injured in a number 3 alarm fire at an industrial building in Chengsha-wan. Their father later told reporters that they lived in a subdivided flat inside the building with their mother and stepfather. All this raises safety concerns. In Lechko today, lawmakers stress there is a need for the government to take a harder stance when enforcing industrial building safety rules.
If this is allowed to go on, it is a time bomb, which can cost lives. Will the administration review these 2 fires and take the opportunity to review the effectiveness of past enforcement actions? The administration is very concerned about the use of industrial buildings for occupation by human beings and the risk involved.
Chan says right now the maximum penalty for those behind subdivided residential units in industrial buildings is a fine of $200,000 and a 1-year jail term. But in the past, only fines were meted out.
In future, when we are going to take prosecution action, if the illegal act is done by a company, we will consider criminally prosecuting the directors of that company. If subdivided units are found in an industrial building, we may criminalize such act.
Chan says right now the buildings department often comes across difficulties when inspecting industrial buildings. Subdivided units can only be discovered if officers actually go inside that particular cubicle. He says some owners are uncooperative and won't let buildings department staff inside. And it takes a long time to obtain warrants. Chan says the government is considering giving buildings department staff more power so that it'll be easier for them to enter suspected subdivided flats at industrial buildings. Winna Wong, TVB News.
Former shareholder of the parent company of California Fitness, who filed a winding up petition against the business, claimed today he's a victim too. This comes as the High Court heard the amount of cash the parent firm has right now cannot even cover a month's operating costs. Evelina Leung tells us more.
The liquidation hearing of JV Fitness Limited was held at the High Court today. The business is the parent company of California Fitness. The hearing came after a shareholder of JV Fitness, Wong Ping-kun, filed a winding-up petition against the firm last month. The court heard today that from 2014 to May this year, JV Fitness lost a total of $110 million. At the moment, it only has $16 million in cash and cannot afford to pay the operating costs of $37 million per month. Separately, Wong met the press this afternoon. He said he wanted to clarify a number of incorrect facts that have been circulating recently. Wong said he bought his shares in the company in December last year and sold them in May. He also claimed during this period he invested $70 to $80 million into the company. Wong accused the firm of hiding its financial problems from him when he made the purchase. He added that he and his family were questioned by the Customs and Excise Department twice in April because of the alleged malpractice at the gym. The former shareholder claimed today that he's a victim as well. Evelina Lang, TVB News.
Beijing is vowing to take all necessary measures to protect its interests in the South China Sea. The warning comes after an international tribunal handed Manila a victory by saying Beijing has no legal basis for its expansive claims there. James Aiken reports.
Beijing today turned up the volume on its opposition to the ruling from the Permanent Court of Arbitration in The Hague. State media called it a puppet of external forces, and now a senior official claims China has the right to set up an air defense identification zone similar to the one in the East China Sea. Vice Foreign Minister Lu Jianmin said the move would be based on the level of threat assessed by Beijing. After calling the tribunal ruling a piece of waste paper, officials today produced their own paper detailing what they say is Beijing's consistent negotiation policies on territorial disputes based on history and law. China's envoy to Washington pointed to the Obama administration's so-called pivot towards Asia as a destabilizing factor in the region and said the ruling will weaken motivation to negotiate.
It will certainly intensify conflicts and even confrontation. In the end, it will undermine the authority and effectiveness of international law.
The U.S. State Department stresses the ruling is legally binding.
The world is watching to see if China is really the global power it professes itself to be, and the responsible power that it professes itself to be. The world's watching this.
The Philippines is emphasizing its strengthened position after the panel's ruling.
So we knew from the start that we might win, but we will have problems of enforcement. We cannot enforce, but then we have the force of world public opinion.
In Taiwan, meanwhile, yesterday's ruling is being called nonsense. Taiwan claims sovereignty over Taiping Island, but the panel ruled that it's in fact a rock. Taipei says it absolutely will not accept the decision. And to press the point, Taiwan's president boarded a Navy frigate ahead of its regular patrol in the disputed region. Tsai Ing-wen said the purpose was to defend national interest. James Aiken, TVB News.
South Korea has picked a site for a U.S.-made advanced missile defense system. The Defense Ministry in Seoul said today the Terminal High Altitude Area Defense System will be based in southeastern Seongju County. Seoul and Washington launched formal talks on deployment after North Korea conducted a fourth nuclear test and carried out a long-range rocket launch earlier this year. North Korea has threatened to retaliate against the system with a physical response once it's installed. Village residents have protested against the decision. They cite fears that electromagnetic waves emitted by radar systems can pose health hazards.
In the United States, Bernie Sanders has finally endorsed his rival Hillary Clinton for president, ending months of uncertainty for the Democratic Party. In a display of unity, Sanders emphatically told his supporters Clinton is the best candidate to fix America's problems and beat Republican Donald Trump in the November election. Alan Buchnia reports.
Before a boisterous crowd in New Hampshire, Sanders gave his long-awaited support to Clinton.
Together, we have begun a political revolution to transform America, and that revolution continues. And I intend to do everything I can to make certain she will be the next president of the United States.
Since losing primaries in California and 5 other states last month, Sanders has been trying to influence the party's platform ahead of the Democratic National Convention in Philadelphia in 2 weeks.
But I am happy to tell you that at the Democratic Platform Committee, which ended Sunday night in Orlando, there was a significant coming together between the two campaigns, and we produced by far the most progressive platform in the history of the Democratic Party.
During her remarks, Clinton embraced many of Sanders' causes, including opposing the Trans-Pacific Partnership trade deal, fighting to raise the minimum wage, and overhauling the campaign finance system.
Let's open the doors to everyone who shares our progressive values. This is one of the most important elections in our lifetimes. So I'm asking you to stand with us, and then I'm asking you to keep working in the weeks, months, and yes, years ahead. You will always have a seat at the table when I am in the White House.
Republican Donald Trump ridiculed the move, saying Sanders had abandoned his supporters. He likened it to Occupy Wall Street, endorsing Goldman Sachs. Alan Bookniak, TVB News.
2 U.S. presidents, past and present, spoke at a memorial honoring the 5 Dallas policemen who died at the hands of a sniper last week. Barack Obama urged Americans to condemn racial prejudice as he and George W. Bush paid tribute to the fallen officers.
I know that Americans are struggling right now with what we've witnessed over the past week. First, the shootings in Minnesota and Baton Rouge. Then the targeting of police by the shooter here. An act not just of demented violence, but of racial hatred. All of it's left us wounded and angry and hurt.
Steps away from chairs left empty for the 5 killed, Obama sought to remind the nation good cops far outweigh the bad ones.
It's as if the deepest fault lines of our democracy have suddenly been exposed, perhaps even widened. I'm here to insist that we are not as divided as we seem. I know how far we've come against impossible odds.
George W. Bush mourned the officers by pointing out they died protecting Americans' right to protest.
With their deaths, we have lost so much. We are grief-stricken, heartbroken, and forever grateful. Most of us imagine if the moment called for that we would risk our lives to protect a spouse or a child. Those wearing the uniform assume that risk for the safety of strangers.
In another part of the country, presumptive Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump lauded the officers as heroes and insisted most police are worthy of the badge.
We have to cherish and take care of our police. If we don't, we don't have a country anymore. We have a country in chaos.
Law enforcement officers from across the country were among the hundreds of people to pay their respects to fallen Dallas Police Sergeant Michael Smith. Funerals for the other 4 will continue throughout this week. And still ahead in our newscast, students ponder their future after learning their DSE results. Theresa May getting ready to take over as British Prime Minister. And Manny Pacquiao planning a comeback.
Oh, my goodness, that's